Pokémon is a series with a ton of layers to it, and a lot of those leave a lot to the player's imagination, which has paved the way for tons of fan theories about various topics. Coming up with a good theory is one of the most fun things you can do as a fan of Pokémon, or anything else really, which is why today I am going to be covering a bunch of Pokémon mini-theories, one highlighting every generation of the series. These are all of my own creation and are short and sweet, but very interesting, so let's cut the chatter and get right into it. Going in no particular order, just to shake things up a bit, I am going to start with my theory for the Johto region. The idea I have here is that Karen of the Johto Elite Four is actually from Celadon City in the Kanto region. The reasoning for this stands on two major points. Number one is that she is a member of the Indigo League, which is shared by both Kanto and Johto, meaning that even though you battle her in the Johto games, she could just as easily be from Kanto, like we see with Koga in those same games. Additionally, every single one of her Pokemon on her main team, so not including her rematch team, can all be obtained in the areas right next to Celadon City. Murkrow, Houndoom's pre-evolved form Houndour, and Vileplume's pre-evolved form Oddish can all be found in the wild in the routes just outside Celadon City in the various Kanto-based games. Gengar's pre-evolutions are obviously located in Lavender Town, which is right next door to Celadon, and her signature Umbreon can be obtained as an Eevee as a gift Pokemon directly within Celadon as well. It's also worth noting that most of her Pokemon can only be found within these areas in and around Celadon as well, which is what makes it particularly convincing to me. So maybe before holding the title of Strongest Elite Four member, Karen spent her days in her hometown of Celadon City. Here's another that is one of my personal favorites on this list. I actually believe that the Swords of Justice, one of Univer's legendary trios, are actually natively from the Kalos region, but not only that they may also be inspired by the French aiding America during the Revolutionary War. As far as being from Kalos, the evidence is pretty cut and dry. Not only are these Pokemon literally based on the Three Musketeers, which come from France, but perhaps even more convincingly, Kalos is strangely absent of any legendary trio aside from its box art legends, while Univer has two, with the Swords of Justice and the Forces of Nature. So perhaps they are from Kalos, but migrated to Univer for some reason. And I believe that reason could be, from a design standpoint anyway, because they are based on France's aid to America during the American Revolutionary War. France was key in helping America win our war for independence against the British, and the backstory of the Swords of Justice also involves a war, where they helped to protect Pokemon that were endangered as a result of the conflict. With the Revolutionary War being such a huge part of American history, I could absolutely see Game Freak wanting to make reference to it, and this theory seems to fit the bill very well in my opinion. So that was actually my theory for Kalos, even though it dealt with the Swords of Justice, but my actual Univer theory is pretty cool too. It's kind of more of an observation really, but it's an exciting idea nevertheless, and that is that Anvil Town actually heavily implies the existence of other Pokemon regions that exist on the same landmass as Univer. To date, Univer is the only Pokemon region based in North America, other than Alola, which is out in the middle of the ocean. So as far as we know, it is completely isolated, and that is one of its major themes. But the existence of Anvil Town suggests otherwise. Anvil Town is in the far northwestern corner of the Univer region, so much so that you can only get there by train. In fact, the whole town is based around trains, as it has several different sets of train tracks flowing into its borders. So with this place being all about trains, which implies something is being transported to and from here, why would it be so out of the way? Why wouldn't it be closer to Greater Univer? Well, I believe that's because Anvil Town serves as the gateway to Univer from one or more other regions that lie to Univer's west, and it is positioned so far away from the rest of Univer because it is supposed to be a sort of connecting point so that Univer can bring in people and supplies from these regions and vice versa. We can directly see that there are several different tracks leading out of town, so we know for a fact that you can go to more places than just mainland Univer from here, and I don't think people would necessarily be taking scenic train rides into the wilderness for fun with no civilization anywhere, and they certainly aren't going to lead out into the ocean to Alola, so even though we haven't seen these supposed regions, this practically guarantees that they exist in my opinion. Westward expansion via the train is also another huge part of US history, so it wouldn't surprise me if Game Freak had this in mind when developing Univer either. So personally, I would love to see this one proven true because I would love to see another North American Pokemon region someday. Next, I'm going to head back to Gen 1 and Kanto and discuss a theory that I actually touched on in a video forever ago, which concerns the idea that Leafeon could have been originally planned for Generation 1. I mentioned this in a video which came out prior to that leak of Pokemon Gold and Silver's beta, which revealed that Leafeon was indeed planned for Gen 2, which proved, if nothing else, that I was on the right track with that video. However, I still believe that it could be possible that Leafeon was planned for even earlier than that and was going to be in the Kanto games at one point. First off, there are actually a few beta Pokemon from that same Gold and Silver leak, like Kotora and Raitora, as well as pre-evolutions of Meowth and Vulpix, that were also in a beta leak for Pokemon Red and Green as well, meaning that those Gen 2 Pokemon were planned for Gen 1, and if those Pokemon could extend from Gen 2 back to Gen 1, then Leafeon certainly could as well. Additionally, there's also evidence to support this being the case, as in Gen 1, all of the evolutions evolved via a stone, and the Leaf Stone was one of only 2 stones that were incompatible with Eevee, which is extremely suspicious because the Leaf Stone is also sold at the Celadon department store alongside the Fire, Water, and Thunder Stones, but again, is the only one of this group who cannot evolve Eevee. It's even more suspicious though that this occurs in the same city where you are gifted an Eevee in the game, and it's even more suspicious that the gym leader in this city uses grass types. We also know that we haven't seen all of Gen 1's cut Pokemon, because we know that plenty more were made than what we see in the final game, and we only got a small handful from that Red and Green beta leak. So I think there is a very strong likelihood that Leafeon had been up for inclusion in the games as early as Generation 1. Let's now jump ahead to Generation 7 and talk about a theory that concerns Magirna. Magirna was the very first Alola Pokemon ever to be revealed, but I actually think that it was intended as a Generation 6 Pokemon instead, or at the very least is originally from the Kalos region. This is because literally nothing about Magirna fits with Alola at all. It is a Steel type who is essentially the first Pokeball, or what Pokeballs were modeled after, and is a cross between a robot and a woman wearing a fancy ornate dress. It's not hard to see that Magirna is very much European inspired, which is just about as far away from Alola's Hawaiian theme as you can get. And considering that just one generation prior to Alola we had Kalos, a region based on France where women wore the kinds of dresses that Magirna is emulating, and Kalos also has a Pokeball factory for what it's worth, to me it's pretty obvious that Magirna was going to be in X and Y, and the only thing we're missing at this point is just confirmation of that fact. If this is true though, it's a really odd decision. What about Magirna caused them to cut it from the Kalos games? Why use it as the first Pokemon of Generation 7 if it just doesn't fit with the region at all? It seems to have been shoehorned into those games, almost like Complete Zygarde was shoehorned into Sun and Moon as well. So maybe it was going to be a part of the fabled Pokemon Z. Who knows? Next up, let's talk about Sinnoh. This is one that I've had on my mind for a long time, and maybe some others have too, and I also think it's pretty much more or less confirmed. I believe that Uxie, Azelf, and Mesprit are the direct ancestors to Mew, and this is where the life of regular Pokemon began. We already know that Mew is the ancestor to all Pokemon that aren't actual gods anyway, meaning that it is effectively the first standard Pokemon, kind of bridging the gap between the literal deities of the world and your average everyday Bidoofs and Caterpies. As it pertains to being birthed directly from the Lake Trio though, all you have to do is place Mew next to them side by side to see the similarities. All of these Pokemon have the exact same body type, being small and floaty, having long tails, short arms, short legs, somewhat cute demeanors. I mean, you couldn't really make them resemble each other too much more than they already do. There's also the fact that Mew is Psychic type just like the Lake Trio. While how exactly Mew came into existence specifically is still up in the air, I think it is most certain that it descends directly from the Lake Trio, either by natural evolutionary means, or by simply using Uxie, Azelf, and Mesprit as a base to create the first Pokemon that would populate the Earth, and evolve life as it was into what it currently is today in the modern Pokemon world. Now we're going to look at Galar, the most recent region and from the current most recent generation. My theory here has to do with Eternatus, and is the idea that the ultimate weapon is what inadvertently caused the darkest day. Now, the ultimate weapon is from Kalos, so you might be wondering how exactly this could be the case. Well, it all has to do with the timeline of the Pokemon world, as the ultimate weapon was originally fired 3,000 years ago, which just so happens to be the same exact time when the original Darkest Day happened. That already seems a little too perfect to be a coincidence, which many people noted as soon as Pokemon Sword and Shield were released. Additionally, the Darkest Day coincides with the awakening of Eternatus itself, which is why another Darkest Day is caused when Rose awakens Eternatus during the events of the game. With that said, we also know that Eternatus crash-landed on Earth inside of a meteorite 20,000 years ago, yet there is no mention of any problem between that time and 3,000 years ago, which is very odd for this Pokemon and what it does, especially for that amount of time. It's also worth noting that Kalos, where the ultimate weapon was fired, is based on France, and therefore would be situated right next to Galar, which is based on the UK, if real-world locations of these places are anything to go by. So it is more than reasonable to believe, in my opinion, that once AZ fired the ultimate weapon, which was so strong that it was actually shown to have gone into space before coming back down to Earth, it created such an immense amount of energy that it actually woke up Eternatus in the neighboring Galar region, which subsequently caused the Darkest Day. It all lines up pretty nicely in my opinion, so until official material comes out and says otherwise, I think this will probably be my own personal headcanon. And finally, we make our way to the Hoenn region. This is a theory whose subject matter has been thrown around by others, but I'm gonna go ahead and put my own spin on it. The theory goes that Togepi and its family are somehow related to Latios and Latias, with the big connection being that they have the same body patterns. There are many ways that this could be interpreted, but if I was to give my 2 cents on the subject, I would say that it might actually be the result of a Togekiss, Togepi's final evolution, going through a legendary beast-esque transformation. The legendary beasts, Entei, Suicune, and Raikou, were famously created when Ho-Oh resurrected 3 nameless Pokemon that perished in the burned tower, and they were brought back as the almost godlike Entei, Suicune, and Raikou, and I believe that something similar may have happened with the Togekiss, being divinely transformed somehow into a Latios and Latias. In addition to the markings that these 2 Pokemon share, they also share a very very distinct temperament, with Togekiss's as well as Latios and Latias's Pokedex entries talking about, almost identically even, how they dislike fighting and are very attuned to the emotions of people and of the world. On top of that, the body shape of these Pokemon are also similar as well, and in such a way that if you look at Latios and Latias after looking at Togekiss, they almost seem like an insanely beefed up version of the Pokemon. Almost like Togekiss Mega Evolved 10 times and became Latios and Latias. Some kind of divine transformation would also explain the type discrepancy between the fairy-type Togekiss and the dragon psychic-type Latios and Latias, which is a pretty big discrepancy admittedly, but if we're talking about divine intervention here, then anything is possible, and who knows, maybe someday we will learn about the possible connection between these Pokemon and whether or not this theory holds up. So what do you guys think of these mini-theories? Let me know in the comments, and subscribe if you haven't for more Pokemon content. You can also support the channel greatly by listening to my Pokemon remixes on Spotify, and by watching my Pokemon Cardinal series here on YouTube, which is immensely appreciated. With that said, I will see you all soon with another video, and until then, as always, I love you all, and I will smell you guys later.